Some state senators are fed up with the lack of action on property taxes. We'll tell you more on what their next steps may be and how it could end up on the ballot next year. Plus a look at the federal budget and what it means for farm programs. And we talk one-on-one with Governor Pete Ricketts this week on Grow. Some rural lawmakers reached the breaking point on taxes, saying if the legislature won't act, maybe the people will. NTV's Tara Gibbons has our report.
During this session, legislators did nothing about the property tax, but now people are fighting back.
We've talked long enough, and it's time to do something.
Lawmakers from rural areas stand together saying property taxes, especially farmland, are unsustainable.
One of the issues that we have that we couldn't deal with is the amount of property tax that's collected to do things not only that the county does, but also what the state forces the counties to pay for.
A method to reduce the dollars people have to pay.
My original intent, the constitutional amendment would have said 1 year from today, no more property tax.
But Senator Kurt Friesen's saying he can't take it anymore.
But each time we ran into a wall, and we've talked about property taxes for 30, 40 years here, and nothing is ever getting done.
According to these senators, Nebraska ranks the 5th highest state that has the most property tax. The reason why they held this press conference is to announce plans to put the issue to the voters, saying farmers get hit the most.
And fellow Nebraskans, we have started. This is the start of property tax relief.
Now the next step is ballot language, then circulating a petition.
These senators say their first hope is that the legislature will put this directly on the ballot for people to decide. But if they don't, they tell us they're prepared to start a petition drive. And that leads to this week's poll question. Depending on the fine print, would you be inclined to support a ballot issue that would lower property taxes, especially on agricultural land in Nebraska? Yes, no, or maybe you're unsure. Follow Grow on Twitter to cast your vote, and we'll hear Governor Ricketts' perspective later in the show. Now to President Trump's budget with a proposal to cut money from crop insurance. According to the Nebraska Farm Bureau, farmers have seen a 50% decline in revenue since 2013, making crop insurance that much more important. Nebraska Farm Bureau President Steve Nelson says he's hopeful to be able to engage in meaningful dialogue about how to support Nebraska's farmers and ranchers in what has been a difficult time. Meanwhile, Nebraska Congressman Adrian Smith says he's got concerns about the proposed $38 billion in farm subsidy cuts over 10 years. He says this is not the first time there have been budget assaults on farm spending, but adds the proposal comes at a difficult time for the farm economy. Smith went on to say the Trump budget is only a proposal, and he doesn't believe Congress has an appetite for severe farm cuts. Some call the president's budget an assault on agriculture. We talked to Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue recently. Here's more.
Do you want to kick a $20 trillion debt down to your grandchildren?
The plain-talking Secretary of Agriculture says it's time to get a handle on the national debt.
Everybody knows we cannot continue spending our way into prosperity, but we can serve the American people through the USDA with safety, with confirmation that they can eat healthy food on their table.
Sonny Perdue making those remarks in Nebraska days before the president's budget was released. It outlines more than $4 billion in cuts to the USDA, eliminating some rural development programs, plus new limits on crop insurance, a program the Ag Secretary had called a priority.
Crop insurance is a wonderful safety net program. We hope we'll see it continued, even enhanced.
The budget proposes closing 17 research centers, but importantly for Nebraska cattlemen, the Meat Animal Research Center in Clay County appears to be mostly spared.
Those dollars have been cut for the last several years, so it's not so much an increase in those dollars, but let's maintain those dollars and let's maybe figure out ways to partner up so we can continue that important research. And it is very vital to Nebraska when we have the Meat Animal Research Center at Clay Center.
Commitment is high on research. We would not be nearly as productive today without basic research, applied research.
Feedlot operator Craig Uden of Cozad, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association president, says cuts were expected, but groups like his will be watching the dollars.
It's not the funding being pulled back, but where the funding actually goes and what programs that it goes to.
In a message on YouTube, Sonny Perdue calls on USDA employees to be winners and not whiners. Well, ethanol shines in Nebraska, creating jobs in communities like Cambridge, Ord, and Central City. Here's more on Renewable Fuels Month. Traffic hums by. Many cars powered in part by American ethanol. Nebraska produces more than 2 billion gallons a year with 24 plants in communities like Ravenna and Central City.
You're talking about 1,300 direct employee jobs across the state, across rural Nebraska. That's key, and having those jobs there, having that tax base there.
The governor proclaimed May as Renewable Fuels Month. The head of the Corn Board says local plants are expanding to meet the market.
But it's building capacity because of export demand too, and so having those markets right here in the U.S. allows us to build a strong economy, allows the jobs to stay in rural Nebraska.
Ethanol, even at higher blends up to 85%, widely available here in Nebraska, but it's another biofuel made from soybeans, biodiesel, that's growing in demand, especially on the coasts.
And that's paid dividends to farmers because it's an industry they really helped create. There was a glut of soybean oil on the market, and they found out a way to use that oil in a way that was profitable for them and good for the environment.
Soy biodiesel demand has skyrocketed 1,000% in the last decade. That also means more soybean meal as a byproduct.
So they can include that soybean meal ration that's really high in protein and positive amino acids for cheaper.
Farmers helped create those markets, and both biodiesel and ethanol boost the bottom line.
Revitalizes our rural economies.
Higher ethanol blends are available at some local pumps. It's common to see E10, gas blended with 10% ethanol, but cars made since 2001 can burn 15% ethanol. Aurora Cooperative has added the fuel at its locations in Grand Island, Aurora, and York. The farm co-op says the ethanol comes directly from a local ethanol plant that uses locally grown corn. They also offer E85, which requires a flex fuel vehicle. Any newer car can use the E15 blends. Senator Deb Fischer says she wants to lift burdens on farmers and ranchers. Fischer this week introduced a bill dealing with on-farm fuel storage. She says regulations for oil refineries could impact above-ground tanks on farms. She calls this a common-sense proposal. Her bill would exempt farms with 10,000 gallons or less of above-ground storage. Nebraska Farm Bureau leaders praise Fischer's legislation. They say there's no significant history of spills on farms to justify the expense of the regulation. Planters are rolling again after wet weather delayed things. The most recent USDA report from this past Monday shows 2 inches of rain or more across most Nebraska counties. That limited planting progress. 87% of corn has been planted, slightly behind average. 52% has emerged. Half of the soybean seed is also in the ground, which is behind schedule for this point in the season. Winter wheat continues to rate fair to good, and sorghum planting is just getting started. First drought and now floods. This is a field in Franklin County, but it looks more like a lake. Nebraska Extension says plants that are partially underwater have a greater chance of survival than those completely submerged. Farmers should also know longer periods of flooding can result in lower yields due to reduced plant stands, reduced nitrogen, and potentially crusted soils. And one Takema farmer having some fun with the rain, wakeboarding in a flooded cornfield. He posted the video on Facebook last weekend and since then has racked up more than 2 million views. And on this Memorial Day weekend, we honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice. On a lighter note, it's the unofficial kickoff to summer, and that means grilling. So, what's your favorite meat to put on the grill? Burgers, brats, and hot dogs? Steak, pork, or chicken? And the runaway winner, no surprise here in the beef state, folks enjoy a good steak. Follow Grow on Twitter to cast your votes. For many Nebraska kids, a field trip to the state capitol is not complete without lunch on the lawn. The school year and legislative calendar both came to a close this week, but not before feeding around 5,000 kids from just under 100 schools. Commodity groups sponsor the egg sack lunch program. Kids get a free lunch and a short presentation from a college student with a farm background. Since its inception 7 years ago, they've served about 35,000 kids. Later, our County Snapshot takes us to Frontier County. Up next, we talk one-on-one with Governor Pete Ricketts.